Hello, this is Douglas Robinson, and in this video we're going to be talking about Cortex 2.4 for archiving Cherwell and updates that we had in the 2.4 release. This version came out in the middle of October. You should have gotten an email if you're an existing customer with details about what's been updated. And in this video we're going to go over some of those features as it relates to using Cortex for Cherwell. The most important ones, I think, for most of our existing customers are going to be updates that we've made to searching. So, for example, previously you used to be able to search either with full text search terms or with filters on specific fields, and you could choose certain fields and you can put in values or choose, field is not empty, it's equal to this, it's equal to that. You could search on that, you could save a search, and then when you got back to the home page, you could run that search, right? Now, in Cortex 2.4 and forward, after you create a search, you'll also be able to delete a search, which sounds very simple, but in prior versions, we added in the ability for people to create and reuse searches separate from all of the saved searches that were in Cherwell, and we hadn't yet added the delete button. And there's a question of, who can delete a search? If I create a search and it's visible to everybody, am I the one who's able to delete it? Is everybody able to delete it? There have been some other questions about, if I create a search, who's able to see it? For example, we also added in the ability to choose visibility. So you can choose everyone, you can choose just me. In prior versions, I think this may have been added in somewhere in the 2.3 line for the visibility, but I don't remember off the top of my head. In prior versions, every search was visible to everyone. And that was also partially the reason that the delete button wasn't there. It was because you didn't want one person to create a search and another person to delete it. But then at the same time, if everybody is creating their own searches, then the list gets polluted. So now you have a couple of new features. You can create a search. It can be available just for you, or you can create it for everyone. You can also rename a search after you've created it. So there's a button here, this little gear icon. If I open it up, I can change the name. I can also reorganize the columns that are on this search, so I can add and change what columns show up in the search. If any of the columns were from related items, there's a little bit of a glitch here. Those will show up as blanks for now, but you can reorganize them. You can remove columns if you don't like the columns that are on the default search grid. You can add custom columns. And if you go through here and let's say you get rid of just about all of these, and then you run this, and you say, you know what, I messed that up, I didn't want it to be like that, you can click this button and reset it back to the defaults. You can also set the search term that's there. In prior versions, I think this only was letting you save searches where you had specific filters. And if you had a custom search term like up here in addition to the filters, it was getting omitted. So now you can actually put that in the saved search. It should get saved there automatically if you saved a search that had it. Otherwise, you can add it in, you can change it along with the columns. I think right now you can, if you want to change the filters, you have to open the search and then click edit, and then you can change the filters here through this little dialog here, and then rerun the search and then save it. I believe at some point in the future that will all end up having more of a cohesive UI where it's all in one place. But previously, editing the filters happened on this screen here. So as we've added in these other things like columns and search terms, those have come into this edit screen for the search. You can also delete the search. Now, when we are looking at records in Cortex, there's also something else that's really cool that's happened with the grids, and basically anywhere that you run a search or you see a list of items, if you are an administrator in Cortex, you will now see this button right here that says View Query. If you click on this, you can see, I think, two different sorry, I have a cold. You can see two different things. You can see the base query that's being used to load the data. So for example, I'm looking at all incidents. So I see select, this is a SQL query, all of my columns for incident. And because I have a customer field in my grid, there's also a left join for SQL to get the customer data, and that's it. So this returns all of the data for incident and all of the customer data. There's a little checkbox that'll format this automatically, but there's also a button here that says load security group filters. And what this does is it adds on any particular filters that might be on the security group that say people in this security group can only see certain records. This query right here is the full query that goes to the database server. So if, for example, we're not seeing records that we should be seeing, or there's some kind of issue, then we, as support, we would end up asking you, hey, can you click on this view query button? Can you click load security group filters? And can you send us either what's in this text box or the whole page? Speaking of security group filters, there is also a couple of new utilities on the side menu. One of them lets you view security groups and see what the configuration is for different security groups in the system. So in this screen, you can see all the different details about a security group in Cherwell. There's this little text box here that says def details that has all of the XML for how the security group is actually stored in the database. You may not find that interesting, but this is actually when we are developing and adding support for things, we're actually parsing through all of this XML. So to some extent, this is a useful developer tool. If you're curious about how everything worked in Cherwell with the security groups or other things, this is really fun to poke through if you can get a tool to format it nicely. You can see the description. You can see a list of all of the different application rights for the security group. These will be named a little bit differently in Cortex than they were in Cherwell, because Cherwell had a friendly name for these, like a display, and they had a internal name. We don't have a list of what those are one-to-one. We might add that at some point in the future, but we don't. I think we don't have plans for that right now. So this is, some of these are self-explanatory. Some of them could be a little bit more obscure, but all of the different application rights are in here. You can see the business object rights for particular business objects. If there are filters, you'll see them here. So for example, earlier I said if you're searching and you've got limits on a particular security group that say you can only see certain records, if you want to confirm that, you can actually go to security groups and go to BizOb rights, pick that business object, and it will actually show you this is a business object that has a particular set of criteria on it. Now, if you're not sure about that, there is a checkbox here that says show only business objects that have visibility filters. If I click user info, you can see I can only see user info records. These are user accounts where the rec ID is not empty. This is one of my test cases, so that's not a realistic filter. But you can see what it would look like here. I have a couple of things here, like on incident, it's just set at least one of the following must be true, and then there's nothing, because I think in one of the versions we'd fixed a bug where if you had this visibility filter set and then there were no criteria under it, it would break queries. But yeah, that's what shows up here. You can see specific rights for the selected business object as well. So this security group, admin, can view, add, edit, and delete the user info business object as well as all of these other things. And if I go somewhere like IT service desk level 1 and I pick incident, it can view, add, and edit, but it can't delete the incident business object. And in this particular case, there are some other more specific cases, like what the team manager and owner can do. In this case, on my system, I've got an incident, and IT Service Desk Level 1 has a specific visibility filter where they can only see tickets where the incident created by field is set to, and then there's an expression there where it's pulling data from a metric. You can ignore this little yellow warning. But yeah, that is the security group viewer, which I probably spent more time explaining than I needed to, but that's fine. Separate from that, we've added in a handy utility for for testing database latency. If you have your app server located pretty far away from your Cortex database, it's probably going to cause latency issues. Like, for example, if you're using a cloud provider for hosting your apps and databases and services, if you put Cortex in a different region than you have the database that Cortex is connecting to, because of the number of different database calls that are going to happen between the app server and the database, you'll probably run into some latency issues. If you suspect that that's the case, we've actually added a utility in here that will tell you, here is your latency to the Cortex application server as far as the Blazor rendering framework that's evaluating everything, and then here is your latency between. I shouldn't say your latency. Here is the latency between the Cortex application server and the database. So in a way, if you add these up together, right, my latency to the application server is half a millisecond because it's running on my local machine. From the application server to the database, it's half a millisecond. So if I do something, I've probably got a total latency of a millisecond. That's functionally nothing. But if this were out in the cloud or it's in a data center somewhere, it's remote, those kind of latencies add up, right? If it was 50 milliseconds to the app server and 100 milliseconds to the database, you would notice it would slow down everything you were doing. And I think at this point, we haven't set out like an official set of guidelines for what these values should be, but they are here on this screen so that you can see what your performance is, what your latency is to the actual database and to the app server. So if you are having issues, this would be one indicator of what's going on with that. Lastly, I wanted to go over some changes that we've had to settings. So in the admin interface for Cortex, if you go to system settings, there is, you can ignore the license key stuff that's on my screen right now. There are a couple of new things that have been added to settings. One, if you don't set your license key in the app settings.json file, you have the option of setting it in the UI in the app. This is mostly going to be useful for people who are running Cortex in Docker. There is a way to specify the license key and a few other things in, I think, environment variables for Docker. But if you're testing the app in Docker, or if you forget to put the license key in there, it is now possible to just directly input it in the app. There's also other settings in here about things like how should defaults happen for things like roles, or how should we handle errors when we can't render exceptions. So most of these have been here in the past. What we have changed is anywhere in this settings UI where there's a checkbox, we had some feedback from our users that they actually could not see the checkboxes on certain displays. So for example, if you were using a TV as a monitor, or if you had your contrast set in a certain way on your screen, the checkboxes were actually, the borders on them just weren't visible. So we've made this a lot more pronounced, and we've changed the layouts a bit. I believe the checkboxes were on a separate line, and that was making it harder to see that they were there. So now these are in line, and they have a much more pronounced border to them. You can also set things like the authentication settings in the UI. On this system, there's just nothing showing up here because I have my authentication settings set up in the app settings.json file. In 2.5, these text boxes will, or drop downs and text boxes will go away if you have this set via the app settings.json file. But what I did want to show was there's now a checkbox here that says auto redirect users to log in. If you're using SAML for your authentication, something that we've gotten a lot of feedback from customers on in both directions is, I want my users to be able to automatically be redirected to my IDP, my identification provider for SAML, and I want that to happen automatically. Now, right now, when we use Cortex, we Now, right now, when we use SAML authentication, we present you with a screen that says more or less, sorry, you're not logged in. Now, that screen, which I don't have in front of me because I don't have my authentication set up on this environment, it's a little confusing for users because it says, you're not logged in or you don't have access to the screen, and then there's a link that says try logging in again. On version 2.4, that is still there. The UI will look the same, but you have a checkbox here where if you check this box, it will skip that screen and it will automatically redirect them to their IDP to log in. We've gotten requests to have that happen automatically. We've also gotten requests to have that happen automatically initially, but then later to not automatically redirect them if, for example, their session is timed out. This checkbox will cause them to be redirected to the IDP or to the SAML provider every time they need to log in. So later, if their session is timed out and this is checked, they will also be redirected to log in again if they're doing something and their session is timed out. At some point in the future, that should get separated out to two different settings for how we handle your session is timed out versus you're just initially visiting the site and logging in. There's some complications to how we're recognizing how people are logging in or not being logged in to making that happen. So that'll probably happen at a future version. But right now, you can check this box and you can have them automatically get redirected. So that should be it for our 2.4 updates. I believe we have a lot of other improvements coming in 2.5. Not the least of which will be an improvement to that sign-in screen I was just talking about. There's going to be a much nicer looking welcome screen and all sorts of other updates. You can see that coming out here at, I believe, at the end of November. And if you have any other questions or comments or concerns, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. You can email us, you can send us a ticket. I believe many of you either have my direct email, Brian's direct email, or our support mailbox, so feel free to contact us.
Hey, last but not least, before you go, there's two things you should check out. They're going to be in the description below as links. We have a Discord server where you can ask all sorts of questions about any questions, you can give feedback, you can voice concerns, you can request certain things, or get more information about different things regarding Cortex and either current or upcoming features. Or you can talk to us on our weekly Cortex users group, which is every Tuesday at, I'm so glad Brian wrote 10 a.m. Pacific time, uh, because I'm not in Pacific time. It's a different time for me. I'm so glad it's on this page. But yeah, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we have a weekly 60-minute, 1 hour meeting where me and Brian get together and we will, honestly, if nobody shows up, we talk to ourselves. But if you show up, we're very happy to show you anything that you want to see about Cortex, talk about what you can do in Cortex either today, tomorrow, so on and so forth. Thanks for watching.